Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the California Master Beekeeper webinar series. This evening, we have camp beekeeper, Christine Kurtz from Petaluma, California. And Christine will be sharing her insight and knowledge and skill and practices on swarm catching. Christine is also known as the Petaluma Bee Lady. This is a woman who is very committed to beekeeping and all elements of beekeeping. So we are in good science-based company this evening, folks. So I encourage you to ask many questions after the presentation and to remember those questions as we go along. Please use the chat feature to type them in, and we'll be sure to save enough time at the end to address them. So welcome, Christine. We appreciate your generosity of time and skill and knowledge. Thanks for showing up for us in the camp this evening at a very busy time of year, right? I mean, you're probably out catching swarms and splitting and doing all kinds of wonderful things in your apiary. Please share with our audience where your apiaries are and how long you've been beekeeping, and then take us on a little knowledge tour on swarms, please.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Christine Kurtz. I live in Petaluma, California. My personal apiaries are located right here in Petaluma, but I also take care of a lot of other people's bees, or my favorite thing is to do private mentoring, where I go in the hive with people and teach them how to do a hive inspection, or I do a lot of sort of crisis management when someone opens their hive and they go, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this. And they call me, and then we'll go in together and see what's going on, whether it's disease, whether it's about ready to swarm, whether they forgot to put some frames in there and the bees, made extra comb and we need to cut and graft comb, whatever it is. I'm there to help and guide. And I do that in 3 different counties. So I'm running around quite a bit doing bees all over the place. But it gives me a good idea what's going on in the neighboring counties. And it's really interesting to see that there are definite trends that happen. And so that's sort of neat to see that there are certain things that are very localized, and there's other things that are more trendy that happen sort of everywhere. So with that being said, I'm not sure, did I tell you, I can't remember if I told you I've been beekeeping for about 15 years now. So I got a good amount of years underneath my belt and lots of experience, especially since I'm in a hive, in somebody's hive, in many people's hives sometimes in a day. So I have lots of experience of different situations. And swarms is one of those things, as you become a beekeeper, as soon as people know that you're a beekeeper, you will get a call at some point that there is a swarm and please come get it. And when you first begin beekeeping, that may be a little bit intimidating, but there's something really sort of thrilling and exciting about swarm catching. And if you catch that bug, you will be on your tippy toes and halfway out the door during swarm season, and your car packed full of what you need in case you get a swarm call. So you might be one of these persons that will be catching just swarms because it's just so fun. And then you can gift those extra swarms once your apiary is full to other beekeepers who are either starting out or who have lost their colonies. And you'll make a lot of people very happy. So here, it took me about 4 years to write love in swarms, because I love swarms. And I love taking pictures. So that's a sort of a little game I played with myself and I'm very proud of. So what is the big deal about swarms, right? Swarms are critical to honeybee reproduction. it is actually part of the reproduction, right? It's the colony as a superorganism dividing in two. And if we don't get the swarms, they will likely perish. We have probably an 18 to 25% survival rate if we don't provide them a cavity. Part of it is because there aren't as many cavities anymore, big trees with hollows. And often if they end up in the wrong places, they get sprayed or people panic and, do all sorts of things that may destroy a colony, right? And when they end up in an inappropriate location, then it becomes a whole different deal. It's no longer called a swarm, and we'll cover that. To continue about what the big deal is about swarm is that, well, they're free. And they can be survivors with good genetics or good genetic traits. At least they have survived 1 year and have gone through a reproductive cycle. We used to say that a survivor colony needed to survive at least 3 years, but under the conditions that we have now, we're really happy if a colony makes it through 1 year and reproduces. So times have changed. It's been really a challenge to keeping bees alive. And beekeepers have been doing it for a long time can really concur with me that we work really hard to keep our colonies alive right now. And then if they're caught also in your geographic microclimate, they can be acclimated to a specific conditions, right? So I'm in Petaluma, which is semi-coastal, and we have fog and wind. And, sometimes beekeeping can only be done between 12 and 3 because in the morning it's foggy, in the afternoon it's too windy, and we only have a small window to beekeep. Well, it also shortens the time the bees can forage. Sometimes it's so cold in the morning that they don't go foraging till 10 or 11 in the morning. And so they have to be fast and furious bees. They have to be able to work really fast. No lackadaisical bees here in Petaluma, right? Versus a climate that is more warm and more temperate, then maybe they can be a little bit more lackadaisical, and they could take their time to build up and get ready for winter. And then the other thing that it does, it does volunteerism. It's a community service to the public. The public is really scared often, and hold on, I'm gonna text my husband about the dogs. Okay, sorry about that.
Hey, no worries. And when you have a chance, we'd love the definition of survivor colony as well, please.
Right. So for me, survivor colony is as simple as a colony that makes it through a year, a season, and survives a winter and is strong enough to swarm or be split if you split. And so the queen has captured certain traits that are adapted to the conditions of your area, right? So does that make sense? And like I said, it used to be that we were looking for bees that survive 3 years, and now we're down to okay, we even like the colonies that survive 1 year. And that we see that they can survive winter, they can prepare for winter, they can deal with the mites. If you're treatment free, that they can do that on their own, that they have the genetic traits to do that. And then we can either split them and spread those genetics or let them swarm and capture the swarms. And it seems that those bees do a lot better, in my experience, than buying packages. That all of my bees that survive started as packages. And I've had bees survive up to 8 years. So of course they've swarmed and they have been divided and they've had requeening and the genetics has been reshuffled, but that's how bees survive. Bees survive by continuously reshuffling their genetics. Every time that virgin queen goes out and gets mated, she mates with a whole set of different drones. And that will give a whole new set of traits that she will bring back to the colony. And that colony will or will not have what it takes to survive, right? But some always do. And so that makes it so that colonies of yesterday aren't the same colonies of today, and they won't be the same colonies of tomorrow, because there's this continuous change and reshuffling and regeneration. And that's why they've been here for millions and millions and millions of years, because of that ability. So swarm or extraction. So when you get a swarm call, sometimes it is an actual swarm. And then sometimes it's in a wall, it's an established colony, but the public or the person who calls may not know the difference. So it's really important when you get that call is to ask the questions, is it coming out of the building, or, a structure, or is it a pile of bees on a branch? Describe it. Often I ask now people to take a picture and send it to me before I go out there, and then I can tell them, oh no, these are actually yellow jackets, they're coming out of the ground. Or, yes, that's a swarm, I'll be right over, right? So if they're not scared, sometimes they're too scared to do it, but often they will go out there and take a picture and send it to me, and that's really helpful. Swarms are also very seasonal, right? They just left the mother hive and they're finding a new home. They're generally mellow, right? There are times where we've had swarms that are a little bit more testy. Often if it's really cold and they're tightly clustered, or windy, or sometimes if they've been on a branch for a very long time and they're hangry, they're just hungry. They've gone through a lot of their stores, and they just haven't found a home yet, and they're just hanging there for a few days, and they tend to be sometimes a little bit more testy then. But generally, they are fairly mellow, right? And they are in a very vulnerable state. They have to protect their queen at all costs because she's the future of the colony. Right? And often swarms can make people scared and anxious, but it can be really exciting for the beekeeper. An extraction then happens, or something that will become a cutout, is something that happens year round. We get those calls year round, right? They're an established hive. They can be big. Bees are more protective and defensive because they have something to defend. They have stores, they have their brood, they have a home to defend. And really, they should only be handled by skilled beekeepers who know what they're doing, right? It often needs special knowledge and specialized equipment. You can see a photo of a bee vacuum. And the public can be annoyed and threaten to spray. Even on the phone, they will tell you, I'm going to spray these, and you have to sometimes even talk them out of it. Say, wait till I come and let's talk about it, and we'll see what we can do. I'll be there as soon as I can, and I Google it, and I know exactly how long I'm going to get there. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Hold your horses, right? And once it's an extraction, it could cost some money. If you have to hire a professional that has to go up a ladder, has to cut into walls, sometimes scaffolding is involved, depending how complex things are, and repairs. So it could be a costly too, and that might scare some people away. But often you can work something out, or I've done some extractions for free for the elderly or people who can't afford it. So there are people that maybe can, get together, or sometimes we did it as a teaching thing where we get a few beekeepers together and we use it as a teaching moment, and we do it together. And so the typical questions to ask when somebody calls you about a swarm is, where is the swarm? Can you describe it? Can you send me a picture? Is it a mass of bees hanging on each other, or is it coming in and out of a hole? right? Because that will tell you the difference either between an extraction and a swarm, or maybe some yellow jackets coming out of the hole. Or sometimes if it's in a little tiny birdhouse, it could be bumblebees. A lot of people don't know the difference. So you have to do a lot of education. You know, you sure they're honeybees and things like that. And sometimes they're like, oh, I think so, but I'm not so sure, you know. So, and then the other question to ask is, how big is the swarm? Is it softball, basketball, golf ball, right? So people can't say sizes. So give them some reference to sizes of the swarm. So it seems like ball sizes is a good, good way to ask for a description. And then the other question, is it in 2 or more sections? Because sometimes there's maybe more than one swarm, or the swarm has divided. The queen landed and then she re-landed somewhere. And then her smell is so strong that they've congregated in 2 different places. And sometimes we don't know if that's what the case is, or if it's 2 separate swarms. So, and I'll show you some picture about that, right? And then some other questions that you can ask is, how long has it been there? Did you see it fly in? Right? Sometimes they've seen it happen, and they'll excitedly tell you the whole story. Sometimes they don't know, because time is of the essence, because a swarm can be there in 20 minutes, or it could be, it could be there 20 minutes, or it could be there for 3 days. You never know what their timing is. They're making their decision. They're sending out their scouts. And so time is of the great essence here. And then also, how high is it? And again, give them some reference, because I've said, people tell me, oh, it's 10 foot high, and it actually was 30. So people can't gauge that. So you can say person heights, 1 story, 2 story, right? People can reference that much better than if you just ask them, how high is it? And then also, how difficult will it be for me to get to it? Any obstacles, hills, bushes, fences? And most of the time, people will be able to give you some good information, whether you have to bring a ladder or not, for example. Or sometimes they have a ladder and you don't have to bring it if you only have a car that you're running around. You don't have a truck to put a ladder in. A lot of people have ladders. And then the other question to ask is, have you called other beekeepers? There are times where people are so panicked, they call absolutely everybody, and you have 10 beekeepers that show up, and it can get pretty testy because everybody wants to claim that swarm. So, and did you get their names? Because sometimes they'll tell me, oh yeah, I called John so-and-so, and I'll go, oh, I know John. He's a great beekeeper. I know he'll be there in a few minutes. Let me know if there's any problem, keep my number. And then I'll call John, and John says, yeah, I'm on my way, and things like that. So we sort of network all the time, at least here in Petaluma. We have a really tight group of beekeepers, and we're always helping each other. And then also, is it near a walkway, public area? Can you put caution tape up? Or I will actually bring some caution tape and maybe some orange, those big orange cones, to sort of, especially if there's a walkway and people are walking by, to sort of tape off that area to make it a safe, sort of a safe zone. And then the other question I often ask is, are you afraid? And if they are, I try to really calm them down and say, don't be afraid. Go in your hive, stay there. I'll be there. I will give you, I'll give you a call when I'm 5 minutes away or around the corner, and try to really sort of soothe the person. And then after I caught the swarm, I have it in the box, I go knock at the door, and I try to give a lot of education. And people really appreciate that. Once they know what's happening and that it's not dangerous and they're not going to die, they're actually really interested and want the information, I have found, mostly. And then the Sonoma County beekeepers, we have started in 2018 to report our swarms. And to find out that is really interesting, we have a nice bell curve. In the first year, we were really excited and going, wow, this is really cool. And then we did it some more. We did it for 2019, 2020, and 2021. And you can see that it's pretty much, although the numbers differ, our curve is very sort of similar. We have this big uptick end of, sort of last 2 weeks of March and the first 3 weeks of April, and then it sort of goes way down. And then right here in May, we have another little bump. And what happens right here is that the blackberry bloom happens, and which is a very significant nectar flow here. If my colonies don't have enough food by middle of May, by the beginning of June, often they suddenly have tons of honey. And that's when the blackberry blooms. And we have tons of, the Petaluma Slough, which is sort of like a river. It's flanked right across the street from me, is flanked with blackberries. And it's amazing that that's a very, how significant that is to my colonies. And I rarely have to feed my colonies. But I have to be patient because I can panic right here when there's a little lull, right? So I always have to talk myself. Remember, in the last few years, it's always happened the same way. Suddenly your colonies have enough food. So the swarm departs from the colony, right? And initially the bees swarm to a temporary location. So here's a swarm in motion. And if you look at this branch, you can see a swirl, and that's exactly where they're gonna land. You can sort of start telling, by looking at the pattern of their flight, where they're going to land. It's really fun to watch, or even to stand in a swarm. It's very electrifying. Right, and there they are, they're starting to land, right? The queen is landing and they're starting to cover her. And then this is when it's finished. And when I watch a swarm leave one of my hives, it takes about 15 minutes only for it to settle. It's absolutely amazing how fast they go quiet into a swarm. And it has happened where I walked right under a swarm and my husband points up and I look up and there is a swarm, because they're so quiet once they're in a swarm formation, right? And that's their self-protection, right? They don't want to know that they're there. They're protecting their queen. They're very vulnerable. They have to now send out their scouts to look for a new location and hold their breath that that's going to happen successfully, right? So they're sending out their scouts, and they dance the same way they're recruiting for forage, right? For forage, they will do the waggle dance, and they will tell you what direction that new location that they're checking out is. And they will have someone fanning some pheromones at the entrance of that new location, and they will recruit some bees, right? It's done by the older bees. And others are recruited to go check it out, right? But we want to catch that swarm before the bees decide where to go, because we've had it, so we put the bees in the box, in our swarm box, and suddenly they take off. And it's almost disappointing, but at the same time, you just in complete wonder, because they've already had made that decision, and you can't change their minds. Once they made that decision to go to a certain location, they're going, right? And then the final destination, hopefully it's in your apiary via your swarm box, right? The swarm is brought home at dusk and hive first thing in the morning. At least that's the way I do it. The reason I leave my swarm box at this location until dusk is because I want to capture as many of the bees as possible, because the scouts are still out scouting. And those scouts, once they're done scouting for a location, they will become your most experienced foragers for forage, and that swarm will need lots of forage to come in to build out. They have what they have in their tummies. They've gorged themselves, but they need a lot more to build all that comb, to then feed themselves and each other. And then when the queen starts laying, to start feeding those larvae. So it's an enormous undertaking, and tons of the research need to come in. So if I leave immediately with my swarm, I leave behind an essential part of the swarm. And I might get a second call later saying, hey, there's still a swarm out there. And you go back and there's a baseball little ball of bees that are queenless, that are huddled together because they were not there when you took that swarm box away during the day. So I always leave my box there till evening, and then I close it up and take it home. Right. And if the swarm is not captured, a quorum is reached, right? So a certain percentage of the bees have decided to a location. They run around the swarm and have a stop signal, which is sort of like a headbutting. Stop dancing for this other location, we've decided, and stop dancing for that other location because we've decided. And then everybody warms up their flight muscles, and then they take off for their final destination. This is actually not an ideal final destination, right? Bees have chosen here a cavity in a house. It's a very difficult swarm retrieval. Some beekeepers have been successful if they arrive as the swarm is arriving in this situation. They put Bee Quick, which is a repellent, on a feather, and they stick it in the hole where they're getting in, and then everybody comes out. The problem is when it's in a house, they may enter inside the house. They may find cracks or places where they can go in the house, and then you have bees in the house. But when this happens, I'm like, okay, I'm sorry to say that this now has become an extraction. It's very hard. If the queen has gone in there, it's impossible to, almost impossible to get them out. And I have phone numbers ready. I know who the professionals are. I gave them a choice of the 3 best people that I know, and they can call and get a quote from all those specialized beekeepers who do this as a living. So the essential swarm catching equipment. So you can see my car, that's my old car, now I have a truck, but is full with everything I would ever need for swarm catching, because I want to be ready. Like I said, it could be 20 minutes and then they're gone, right? So I want to be there as soon as I can. I don't want to sit there and go, okay, what will I need for this swarm catch? I want to have everything in the car so that I can just jump in and go. It really saves a lot of time. Right. And is your car gassed up? You don't want to, go in your car and go, oh, don't have enough gas. And that takes another 20 minutes to go to the gas station and gas it up. So what I bring, the essential swarm catching equipment that I bring, is some swarm boxes. And don't forget the little cap if you use these kinds of boxes. Some blue tape, because I will tape the edges of the lids because inevitably they leak. And sometimes I also, after a while, because they get all beat up, I will duct tape the box to make it sturdy. Some frames, I'm foundationless, so I put some frames with just some wires in there, and a drawn comb. If you have that, is super helpful. They tend to stay in the box a lot more if you have a piece of drawn comb, because it just feels like home. It smells like home. It feels like home, and they just hang on to that piece of comb with their dear life, and they seem to stay in the box. And some straps. If I strictly use tape, but some people strap their swarm box, depending what kind of swarm box you use, right? Some protective gear. And then I always bring some extra. I have a whole box with even kids size, because every once in a while I have some kids that are so interested and they want to come up closer and they can't. So I put them up quickly in a suit, or have their mom or dad put them in a suit, and they can come and watch closer, right? I also have a notebook. Every once in a while, I have to leave a note to somebody, a homeowner that is not home. And I leave a note saying, I was here, I'm a beekeeper, here's my phone number or my card. I captured a swarm in your front yard. There's a box there. I will pick it up this evening. Right. So it's always nice to have something to write and I have the tape to put it on their door. And then a smoker. And that's not to smoke the bees. Do not smoke a swarm. They're communicating, they're dancing, their pheromones are going to keep them coalesced. But every once in a while, you will get stung by a bee by accident, or if you have a little bit more testy swarm. And so you want to, if that happens, smoke yourself, because you have an alarm pheromone that's been released with the stinger, and you'll have other bees getting into the mode of defense. And so you may get more stings. So the smoker is only there handy if I need it. I don't even light it, only if I have to, right? I have it all ready to go. But I want to not have that alarm pheromone while I'm working the swarm. A ladder can be very helpful, and some clippers. Sometimes you have to clip some branches out of the way to get to it. I also have one on a pole when I'm working with swarms that are really up high with a clipper. But you have to be very careful, because if you shake the branch, the swarm might fall. They're very viscous, those bees, right? So be careful when you are cutting branches around a swarm, is that little clumps can fall. And then I have my bee quick, which is a repellent. I'll show you ways that I use it. Here's the Fisher Bee Quick. There's a bigger picture of it right here on the right. A little bit of sugar water. If I have in a spray bottle, if I have a hangry swarm, I know it's been there for 3 days, I give them a little bit of sugar water, spray a little bit of sugar water on them, or on that drawn comb, I will spray a little bit of sugar water in there to give them something to lick up. But that's probably the only reason I would use that sugar water. And my favorite bee sting remedy, which is aloe vera. I just take a couple of sprigs with me, and I use just the pulp on the inside and just rub it on. I don't react anymore as much anymore, and so I don't really need it anymore. I've developed immunity for bee stings, but you always have to be ready. That can change. Your reaction to bee stings can change at any moment. So, but I like to have my remedy with me, and some water. First of all, if you want to mix some sugar water on site, or for yourself too, because sometimes you can be there for quite some time. And if it's really hot, it's easy to get dehydrated in your bee suit. So bring a little water. And then a bed sheet or a tarp. I'm going to show you why and a way to use it. And then a mesh bag. If you have a car and not a truck to transport your bees, it's probably a good idea. They have this specialized really big mesh bag, or if you have a big laundry mesh bag, that could help too. That has very fine meshing. It's just in case you have some wayward bees that are on the box or escape from the box, that they're contained. So when you're driving on the nice bumpy roads that are sometimes out there, that everybody stays with confined, right? And then turkey feathers. I don't like the commercial bee brushes. They're too stiff and too sharp. I feel that they hurt the bees more than they help the bees. And so I love collecting in the fall turkey feathers when they molt. And my favorite are the strut feather, the male turkey strut feathers, because it's stiff on one side and very soft on the other. And depending on what I need to do, I use one or the other side. I have a whole collection of them. And then using caution tape. I've talked about caution tape. This was at our local hospital, right? And so I used my cones, and here's a passerby. So he's staying at safe distance from my swarm box. The bees were in the tree, and I strapped the swarm box to the tree till evening, because I want to catch all those scouts out there coming in. And it just keeps anybody from, walking too close or doing something silly close to my swarm area. Here, this picture on the left was at our mall here, our outlet mall. And actually the staff there put the sign with the beehive. They said beehive instead of swarm, but they used beehive because it was up in the sort of, there was this vine and it was up way up high in the vines and with an arrow. And then I just turned the sign down. Once I had the bees in the box, I just used their signs and put the arrow that's where my where the beehive is now located. And then we also put caution tape around it. So it was nice when other people make a sign for you. For me, this is a super essential swarm catching equipment. It's this homemade swarm bucket and pole instrument, for lack of other words. It's one of those 5-gallon water jugs with the bottom cut off, and then with a 1 3/4 inch pipe, about 1 foot long, and a 3/4 inch coupler and metal strap to hold it all together. And make sure you have it capped on the inside so the bees don't fall through there. This one is particularly nice because it has a handle. So you can catch it really well when it comes down. And I'll show you later how to use it. But it used to be that some of the really high swarms, we would just look at them and say, oh, well, goodbye. Good luck, because we had no way to getting it aside from having a cherry picker, and nobody has a cherry picker. So now we can catch a lot of swarms that are really high and also not go up ladders. I use this often with, instead of going up a ladder, especially as I'm getting older. I'm really more wary about ladders. This is an easy swarm catch, right? Time is of the essence, of course, right? You want to capture them before they decide. And a dream swarm is a 5 foot high, accessible. Bees can be shaken or gently brushed into a swarm box very easily. We love those kind of swarms. They don't take a lot of time and very satisfying and very quick, but that doesn't always happen, right? Often I like to put my swarm box till evening up on something, not on the ground. Sometimes ants harass swarms if you leave them on the ground, or people trip over them or anything like that. So I like to have them a little bit up off the ground. Sometimes I just have a small little step ladder, or I use the ladder itself and bungee cord the box to it like I did at the in the hospital picture. Here's a little queenless lot. So this is what I was talking about. If you leave with your swarm during the day, in the evening you have this very sorry little bunch of bees, and these are all the scouts, right? And another beekeeper, if the person doesn't remember who they called, they may go back on that. If you guys have a swarm list, they may go back on the swarm list and call somebody else. And you get there and all you have is this small little lot of bees. I collect them anyway because the homeowners are concerned. But then I really try to find out who that beekeeper is and try to talk to that beekeeper. Sometimes I don't know, and I'll just take the bees home and I just release them and hope they will find one of my hives or something, because you can't leave them there because people think it's another swarm. And then every once in a while, it can also be an abscond, right? When we get swarm calls starting in July, August, September, October, and they're really, really small, like a fist size, sometimes it's not a reproductive swarm anymore. It's an abscond. Well, I still do my duty as community service, and I will take them home and I will put them in a little nuke box with some drawn comb and see what they can do. I may give them a frame with a little bit of honey from another hive that I've reserved. And every blue moon, one of those will make it through winter and become an amazing colony next year. But often they don't make it through. But I feel like you still need to collect it and take it home. You can't be picky and choosy to the, going, well, that's not big enough. I'm not going to, get the swarm. You really have to if you're going out there and you get a call from the public, it's your responsibility, no matter the size or the conditions or why that swarm is there, you need to collect it. At least I think so. So there's another easy and accessible. It was on a rose bush. All I had to do is put my swarm box close to it, shake the branch in, and they were in. Poof, done. Easy, 3 feet high, and close the lid and wait till evening and pick it up. Right? Talk to the homeowner and pick it up. Easy peasy. There's the other one. We had that picture at the beginning. And this was in somebody's apiary. And what is wonderful, if it's in your own apiary, is that you can put them in your own equipment right away, right? So we were able to just cut that branch. You put the equipment underneath first, and we put it that way. Otherwise, if the bees fall into the grass, it's really hard to get to them. They're spread out. They're all over everything. So just put the equipment underneath. We cut the branch. You just set the branch down, and they just climb right in. There was some drawn comb in there and some old frames that had propolis on it, and they just love it when they find a place where bees have been before, right? They almost crawl and disappear, and it happens really fast. It's pretty amazing. So here's one that's about 10 feet high. I'm mentoring this beekeeper, and I'm holding the ladder. I want to make sure she's sturdy. And then I'm going to hand her the swarm box. The homeowner was there, and I felt like he was a little bit too close. He said he wasn't scared, but I asked him to step back or to wear one of the bee suits I brought. And he decided to step back. And so it's safer. And then it was pretty easy to get to the swarm. She just had to cut a couple of branches that were in the way, and we put the swarm box underneath. She gave that branch a quick shake, and it was in there, right? So this is the right size ladder, right? You don't want, I'll show you a picture of people on ladders that make me really nervous. This makes me really nervous. Safety first, right? He's just, he's using both his hands. He's not hanging on. There's no branch to hang on to, or he's just using his knees to hang on. And that makes me really nervous. Even though he does have a spotter here, because there's 3 beekeepers working in this swarm, I much prefer seeing him much lower on the ladder. Maybe get a taller ladder if the hive is if the swarm is too high, but really be mindful. We've had beekeepers fall off and break bones. So safety first, right? And it's so easy to get overly excited too. So really, put your safety head on first, right? Here we have bee buddies. You have the spotter. It's nice to have a little group of people that do it together. This was a very clever little thing. So do you see the swarm box is on a pole? They added a piece of wood and screwed in a pole so that, that the beekeeper didn't have to hold the box with both hands, and had one hand free to hold the swarm box and the other one to shake the bees in. So beekeepers come up with really clever little ideas like that for safety. And wear protective gear, even if you're going up a tree to investigate or just to look at it. This beekeeper had to run down. This was at my house, and he was a fairly new beekeeper, and he was so excited. He ran up there before I could say, wait, and, by doing that, he sort of shook the tree, and the bees got riled up, and he got quite a few stings. And that's when you start falling off ladders, because you start swatting or saying, ouch, right? So there are genetic differences in temperament. There are hangry swarms that have been there for a long time and things like that. So, and they can be defensive if you really disturb them, in a very sort of jerky way, right? So ridiculously high ladder. This is me and my sister. These were, we were at an electrician's house. We had these tall ladders. And I told my sister that day, do you want to go on a bee adventure? Well, she had no idea what I was asking her to do. And it took 2 of us on these ridiculously tall ladders to get the swarm up really high on a tree, and it was sort of caked on a very thick branch, so we couldn't use our pole and our bucket for it. And it took the two of us holding the box and go down rung by rung by rung. Well, now that I look at this picture, I'm like, this is crazy, don't do it. It's not worth falling to get to the swarm. So I'm much more careful now. And, we'll just sometimes say, you know what, that swarm will just have to be on its own and find a home on its own. Or we can try to put a trap out, either a hive or a swarm trap with some lure in it, like lemongrass oil in a cotton ball, and put that trap as close as we can to that swarm. And sometimes we get lucky that they crawl right in, or they choose that as their location. So, but no more super tall ladders for this lady here. And then cutting branches, right? To clear a way to a swarm, sometimes you have to remove a branch, or sometimes it's really easy to cut the entire branch, come down, and then shake it into your swarm box. But be really, really respectful of the homeowner. And if the homeowner is present, ask permission, right? And be careful that the bees in the swarm formations are because they're very viscous, and the clumps can fall off, including the queen. So don't wave that thing around saying, I got it, right? Because they could all fall on the ground or on yourself. So you have to move very, very slowly. When you cut the branch off, you have to make sure that you're not shaking that branch. So make sure that your shears are very sharp, right? Because the bees will fall, right? Like right here, this beekeeper, right, had a bunch of bees fall on her head, right? So be careful, right? Check your bee suit afterwards. That's another reason to have more than one beekeeper there, because they can tell you, excuse me, you have a lot of bees on your hat. Don't take your veil off yet. Let's brush those off into the swarm box before you take your veil off, right? This homeowner declined permission to cut the branch and put it in a swarm box because it was her prize olive tree, right? So sometimes you just have to work around that and find a different way to get to the swarm, right? So this would be a ladder. This would be going up a ladder with a swarm box and things like that. So alternative methods can be, have to be used. So using the use of a sheet, right, is that first of all, you can see the bees, and the bees have a much easier time climbing into your equipment if they're on the ground, especially if they fall down. If they're in the grass, in the leaves, they have a hard time navigating, or you don't see them because they're the same colors of the dried grass or branches or whatever they're on, and you start stepping on them. And that's not fun to do. Nobody likes to step on bees and squish bees. So this makes them much more visible and much easier for them to climb into the box. Here's a very, very high swarm. This swarm we actually couldn't quite reach. So we put a piece of drawn comb inside and just put it right next to the branch where the bees are. So we just could touch it, and then it could crawl in there, and then we'd take it down. And we did that over and over and over again until we had that swarm in the box. Right? 2 people often is really good to have it with this bucket and pole method, because as you come down, here's my friend John, he's standing on his truck, and as he's coming down, his wife is receiving, right, the which is removable from the pole, the bucket, and then she can shake it in the swarm box. The middle picture, here I am. See how high that swarm was? Way up in here, right? And I had to really, I think I was also on a small ladder to reach it. right? And then I come down, and then I had other beekeepers there to receive it. So here is they put down the sheet, right? There is the swarm is right in here. They had to cut off a few branches to get to it. And then, you know, he comes down with the pole. He shakes them in with a big jerk upwards. And then he comes down, and then somebody else catches it and pours it in the swarm box. And sometimes you have to do it several times. And then you watch for the behavior of the bees to see if you see that classic fanning. And they have to go up several times to get as many bees as you can. Once you get the queen, a lot of the queen will come, except the scouts who are still scouting or coming back with food or whatever. They want to go back to that location. And so you often have a little clump that always wants to go back there. And if you go up there to get them, they go flighty. You know, you almost can't do it. And so that, if I'm confident that the bees are in the box or the queen is in the box, then I will use the Bee Quick, and I'll show you in a little bit how to do that. And here is Darlene putting the bees, shaking the bees in the box, and then they are done and they're going home. They live there, so they can go back at dusk and go get the last little bit that's staying there. So they took their bees right away to hive, and in the evening they went back to get the little clump. So that if it's in your own apiary, you can do that, right? And then here they're hiving that swarm immediately in their apiary. So here again is a very high, swarm that we put, and we actually cut that branch. I had the really pole with the shears on it. And pine trees are particularly tough because they have all these little spines, and the bees really hang on to it. So we cut the swarm inside the bucket and fell inside the bucket and came down, and then we shook it into the box. This is Etta Marie. She's our oldest beekeeper. She's 83 and she runs the 4-H program. She is amazing. And here suddenly we had a second swarm. What happened? Is this a second swarm, or did the queen not make it into our little bucket? And they regathered around her, but we weren't sure if this was a second swarm. So we put them in 2 separate boxes, and we faced them to each other. And lo and behold, suddenly one box started moving in droves into the other box. So we knew that they were related, they were the same swarm. And by evening, they were all in one box. So if you're unsure, hive them in 2 separate boxes, put them next to each other, and eventually they will either stay in their respective boxes if they're 2 different swarms, or they will merge again into one. All right, so once I've been up there with my pole and bucket, and the bees, some of the bees keep going up there, and I know I have my queen in the box, I put a little bit of Bisquick on a feather and I tape it to my pole, and I paint the branch where the swarm was. This will keep all the foragers airbound, and eventually they make big circles of flight, and eventually they smell their colony that is on the ground. And you will capture most of your foragers or your scouts that way into the box by evening, right? Here I'm painting, they were on this gutter, and they keep wanting to go under here. I knew I had my queen, so I just put a little beak with my feather and I painted that right in there. It's just a little trick. Our pole and bucket was such a wonderful contraption that we did a fundraiser of it in our bee association, and now pretty much everybody has one. I think we probably made 100 of these. And if you don't have one, somebody in your group or in our group has one, and they lend it to each other. They leave it outside their door and people can go pick it up. So swarms in thickets and brambles or low to the ground. Look at this, there's thorns everywhere on this one. Those are really sort of difficult swarms to get. How do you get to these swarms without, shredding your gloves and yourself, and how do you get them off the ground? Now, if you have drawn comb, it is absolutely amazing how quickly bees will climb up onto it. And actually how quickly the queen will find it. She is attracted to that comb. That is absolutely amazing. Sometimes I see her climb up. And then once you have her and put her in the box, you can just put the entrance of your box or your hive, like in this instance, really close to where the swarm is, and they all will climb in. They will all find the queen. It's absolutely amazing. So you can get these swarms that are sort of difficult to get with drawn comb. Here was one swarm. You can see it in the middle picture. It was splattered on the ground. It actually fell. It was a super windy day. It was a big swarm, and it fell to the ground. And the beekeeper was just beside herself. And she called me, and I said, "Oh, no problem. I know exactly what to do." And I just put a piece of comb in the middle of it. You can see how full of bees it was, and I stuck it in there, and I took the next one and the next comb, and then pretty soon, once I had the queen, wow, look at them. They're all pointing and actually running into the hive themselves. It was extraordinary to watch. They're all pointing in that direction. They knew the queen was in there. They started fanning, and boy, it was just wonderful to just sit there and watch. Here too, on the ground, I'm sticking some comb in it. And here, there she is. She climbed, there's the queen in there. I saw her and was able to take a picture. And I got her in that first piece of comb. I put her in there, right? And the other, then I put empty frames for them to build. And there I had it. Then I put the swarm box right next to where the swarm was, and they all climbed in. Right. This one was a difficult one. It was caked all around a thick trunk. It wasn't in a nice ball or something. So I made a little bridge to the hive. It was again in somebody's apiary. So we were using their equipment and their hive. And they slowly started moving over into the hive. It was a very slow process. Let's put it that way. At the end, I think I just started scooping them up and helping them along, but that was a very slow process. But it's possible to help them with a little bridge, right? There's the use of my feather. This is when I use the more stiff part of my turkey feather, strut feather, and I just actually use the lid of my swarm box and just sort of brush them in and then put them in the box very gently. Right? Two swarms, multiple swarm. Is it a primary swarm, a secondary swarm? Did the queen land twice? What's going on? Again, I hive these separately. Then I put the two boxes next to each other. If they stay in their respective boxes, they don't belong to each other. They each have a queen. If they suddenly all move into one box, that means they're from the same lot, right? Here, actually, you see three swarms. There's one here, two, one here, and one here. And I didn't get there on time, but the beekeeper decided that he was going to put them all in the same box because they looked fairly small. Well, the first two were related and were just fine. They got along in the box, but this third one was another swarm, was a secondary swarm or a swarm from another hive. And there was major fighting going on. They did not belong together. They just, there was a carnage. So again, if it were me, I would have put them in 3 different boxes and then put them together and see and let them sort it out. They know where they belong, right? Right, like this, like merging the 2 swarms here. It was a very hot day, and so we put planks on it to shade them. But again, you know, they knew that they all belong together, and one box ended up in the other box, and they were all happy and copacetic, right? This is when you call every beekeeper. This was a commercial beekeeping outfit, and it was a swarm frenzy. There must have been 10 swarm on this tree. We did get permission from the beekeeper he goes, go have at it. We don't have time. And we had, here we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were more. There were more people coming with swarm boxes. I think that year, everybody that didn't have bees got bees because we had so many bees on this one tree. It was just, we couldn't believe, we still talk about this. It was extraordinary. I think the entire apiary was swarming. It was just crazy. There was bees everywhere. And then here's the queen is here signal, basically, right? They make this handstand and they tip the last part of their little abdomen, the last segment, and sort of free up this little area where the Nasanov glands are, and they exude a pheromone that calls the bees in. The queen is here. The queen, come home. She's here, right? Here's a close up. There's that little tip of their abdomen. It's down and it's exposing the glands right here. And then they're fanning profusely. They're making that waft away. And then they go and they call everybody in. They also do this behavior when you open the hive and you disturb them. They also do this behavior when they have an orientation flight in front of your hive and it's time for those young bees to come home. And they'll do that in front of the hive. And then they go, oh, it's time to come home. And they'll bring all the young bees in, right? It's not always 100% sign that the queen is in there, but it's pretty close. I've had it where I've dumped the swarm into the swarm box and they fan profusely and suddenly they stopped. It's almost like they looked at each other. Wait a minute, the queen's not in here. And floop, they were back up in the tree. I didn't get the queen, right? She was still up there. And that can happen fairly fast. So they can change gear. So be patient, watch for the fanning, and that is pretty consistent and that more and more bees do it, right? And give it some time before you like, yes, we got the queen in there. And then alternative hives, right? You can modify your swarm box for different types of frames. So here's my friend Tia, who has a top bar, and she shortened her swarm box so that her top bars fit in there. And then she can hive them into the box, into her top bar directly. Some people just put them in the box without frames and then they dump the swarm again. But I found that that's really disruptive to bees because you've dumped them into swarm box and now you're dumping them again into your hive. And so if they're already festooning and building comb and they're just quiet and doing their job, I think it's just a gentler approach in my view. And you can see how quickly they go to work. Immediately, they start to build comb, right? They festoon and they hang on to each other and they start exuding that wax. Urban swarm, can be really difficult. They went into the grill of this car, under the hood, right? You have to put the hood up to get to the swarm. So bees want to usually build at the uppermost part of a cavity. And for them, it was under the hood. There was enough room under the hood into this, there must have been a cavity or some space. And that's where they were going to make their nest. So, all these trees there was no cavities. They didn't find anything else but this GMC car. And can you imagine the owner of the car coming back to this? But fortunately, there was a beekeeper who knew what to do here. This wasn't not my call, but it was somebody else's call. But I thought it'd be interesting because some of us live in urban areas. The other call you get often, which is not a swarm call, it's an extraction, is these water meter, because they have one little hole and a cavity in there. It's a perfect little hive. And actually, these are great to learn how to do extractions because they're small. The comb often fits into a frame. There's no cutting involved. There's just rubber banding involved. And so those could be a really good way to learn how to graft comb onto frames and do small little extractions if you want to ever dabble into that. This one seemed like a regular swarm on a barn wall, but if you look very carefully, right here is where they're entering into the hive. So I sort of knew these were already going into a hive. So I was scraping them off the entrance, the barn wall. And then here is where they were going in. I got permission to open up the wall. That barn, they say, was coming down soon anyway. So go at it. And it was actually really brittle. I could just, with my hands, just tore off the siding. And there they were. Look at how many bees were outside earlier and how many bees were already inside. That was a really big swarm. So I was like, easy peasy, I'll just collect these, put them in the box. And as I put them in the box, darn it, I knew I didn't have the queen. They weren't acting right. They weren't doing the fanning. And then I noticed, so that big clump we just saw before was right under here. I noticed there was a hole in that cross beam here, and they were climbing up through the hole and were going up. And I could follow the bees. They were beelining up there on this side. They were beelining up on this side. I'm like, oh, that's where the queen is. She's way up here, right? So remember, like I said, they like to build the most upper part. So this is the most upper part because they had this little hole here to go into this cavity. So now it became more complicated. I'm up on a ladder, scooping the bees in, trying to get that queen. There's bees everywhere. The box got so heavy that I got another box so that I could hold it. It was lighter. And then I put the boxes together and then they joined. And I got the queen and everything was good in the land of swarms, right? Unusual places, the box of bees. We call this a box of bees. So it was on somebody's balcony. They were inside a box, underneath some boxes. And so we just took the whole box home. We didn't, we poked in there. We saw there was some comb that already started to build. And actually they were there for quite some time. And we just brought it home. We put it on the hive where it was going to be hived in. And for a couple of days, they were orienting there. And then so all the foragers and the older bees were oriented to this hive. And then we just took the box around the corner. All the foragers went back there, and all we had to deal with is the nurse bees. So they were really calm. And then we did it like a little extraction. We cut the comb, we cut it to size, we rubber banded, and then we put everybody back together. And then this is when bees get sprayed, right? We got a call. Was so sad because that was such a beautiful colony. It looked so healthy. They panicked and they sprayed. And it's very sad and it's very upsetting. And fear is number one enemy, right? Use the opportunity to educate people. Those homeowners have now a beekeeper's phone in their contacts. I made them sit there and put my name, and I said, put Christine Bees, because if you don't remember my name, all you have to do in the search is put bees and you'll find me. And then we talked about what swarms are and what they're doing and that they're reproducing and so on and so forth. And call us, please call us before you ever spray again. And they were really, they understood, they got the message, and they also were very saddened. So education. And then open air hives happen sometimes where the bees never left this. They couldn't decide, or the weather wasn't conducive. We have a whole week of cold, rainy days or cold, windy days, and they just started building comb. And once they start building comb and the queen starts laying, they stay there. And so we get maybe one a year, two sometimes. Last year we didn't get any of these open air hives, and that becomes an extraction where you cut the comb and graft and rubber band. And again, you need to know what you're doing. So enlist some more experienced beekeepers. Swarms that are super large, this would never fit in a swarm box. Fortunately, I had some new equipment in my car. I taped them together. I just had an inner cover that I put underneath, and then I ran home to get the other part, taped it all together, and took it home as a hive in 2 medium boxes. So sometimes you just gotta improvise. Chimney, those are my least favorite. We had to, they started a little smoke underneath to get them out. It was a really tall chimney. I never got the queen. She never got out. I had a bunch of queenless bees. I just put some eggs in there and they made a new queen, but it is dangerous. I couldn't see inside the chimney. Yeah, so I don't know. Those are the most difficult. I just give those to the professional extractor now because they're hard. They're hard to get. So pass it on to a professional. Fallen trees, we get those every year. Unfortunately, sometimes here's the bees, they're festooned right here. So we put those in a box and then we grafted the comb. Here's a cut down tree that had bees in this little crack. And sometimes these we can cut where the beehive is. And if you have a trailer or something, you can take that whole thing home and have a bee tree in your home. Or do that extraction at your home where you cut open and then do the grafting. There's that bee tree that fell, right? We took as much as we can that we could salvage, rubber banded them onto the frames, and then we reunited the bees with their comb and their brood. Diverting flight, I'm trying to go really fast. I'm almost done. I know I'm over time. There's this construction crew had to do some work with jackhammers, and there was a beehive in this big dead tree, and they were going straight to where they were working. And when they called, they got, somebody said, do nothing. Somebody said, cut the tree down. Somebody said, kill the bees. And we were shocked because all we needed to do is to divert the bees' flight path, which we did with a piece of screen, and we screwed some wood to keep the screen, and the bees, instead of going that way, they had to go the other way. And we left a bunch of bee suits there in case. We said, if they get riled up or if they bother you, put a bee suit on, right? They never had to. Everything was fine. In the evening when they were done, they called us back. We picked up our bee suits and we took the screen off and we let those bees live there the rest of their lives. Okay, transporting bees, put the entrance in the same direction as the driver. Otherwise, your frames will sway back and forth. This way, because they have the end bar and the top and the in front of the end bars will get the brunt of the back and forth that you do when you're driving, and they don't the frames don't sway. If you put it the other way, the frames will sway and you can have some casualties, right? And then hiving a swarm, do it very gently, very slowly. They are very fragile in hanging on to each other. They can fall very easily. So very, very gently take each frame out at a time. I put my swarm box on the hive in the evening. I open that little opening so that I get air, and I hive them early in the morning when they're festooning. It's cold. You're not going to chill any brood because they don't have brood, and it's actually the easiest time to swarm them. If you do it during the day and they're all flighty, it can be pretty mayhemish. And so if I do it early in the morning when it's still cool, they stay clustered together. It seems to just work really beautifully. And then here we go, one at a time. Here I'm mentoring somebody, hiving a swarm one by one into the hive. And then feeding swarms. I typically do not feed swarms. The bees come with full bellies ready to build. I will feed bees that I've extracted so that they can correct the comb that I've cut and regrafted. And often the extractions happen in the summer when homeowners realize that they have a growing colony. They may not notice them at the beginning, and suddenly you have a huge colony and they're starting to maybe be a little bit more defensive, or they're noticing them. And so, they don't come like a swarm with full bellies. So I will feed an extraction or cut out. But you can see in the pictures, when you take photos of bees in the swarm, they're completely translucent. They're full of nectar and honey, completely their abdomen expanded. And then requeening swarms, I don't immediately requeen my swarms. Some people do, and they buy a queen because they want a certain lineage, or they want calm bees, or whatever it is that they want. I love, love, love the diversity in queens. Look at these queens, how differently they look. I love to wait to see how they perform, right? Plus, often swarms will requeen within a month or two because it's the old queen that left and they want a young, vibrant queen to overwinter. And so often we see supersedure cells. So that's something when I do hive inspection of swarms, I first of all I look that I have a functioning queen, that she made it through the journey. Then I'm always looking to see if they're requeening. And if they are, then I follow up. I make sure that in 4 or 5 weeks, I have that new queen, that it happens successfully. Sometimes it doesn't, and you can intervene, but you have to follow up, right? And then swarm land in different places, sometimes outside a swarm trap, sometimes on some tree guy's equipment, right? Here we're using that comb for them to crawl on because they were caked all over. How do you capture this swarm that is just all over the place? Here's a middle of a field and nowhere on a post and some wire. Above some arbor, fences, chain link fences, roofs and gutters, trees, right? Arbor again. Look at this swarm. Amazing that somebody saw it and called it in. It was so camouflage. It could be like part of the wall, right? Bushes, right? And then education. This guy here, I swear to God, he asked me 120 questions. He was so interested. And kids love it when kids are present. Look at this boy, he's smelling the comb. Smells so good, and then he's like, bzz, 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 I'm a bee. He was running around like he was a bee caught in the bucket, right? And here we are talking about the comb and the hexagon and that the bees build this with wax and on and on and on. And this is absolutely my favorite picture. This little boy, he was just wanted to commune with the bee. He wanted to sit with the bees. I had 2 swarms at that location and he just wanted to sit there. And he sit there for like 20 minutes and just watch the bees go in and out. Oh my gosh, melted my heart. And then, are you ready and prepared? Is your equipment assembled? How many swarms do you actually want? Right? There's a point where you will maybe have too many. So consider sharing your surplus swarms with members of your bee association, especially people who have lost it all, and maybe who don't want to buy packages anymore and want to do swarms. So, once you start catching swarming and then your name gets around, you will get lots of calls. And I think that's it for me tonight. Right? Swarms, gotta love them.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate your enthusiasm and your expertise. We certainly tell you have a passion for what you do, and you do it with excellence. Bees are lucky. Yeah.
Someday I'll keep it on an hour. I just can't do it yet.
It's all good. And I also, before I end the recording and go to questions, I do want to add that if you are in Southern California in an area where you have Scutellata hybrid genetics, or you don't know oftentimes we don't know where the swarms are coming from, it is a good idea to requeen for sure, for safety purposes. And we really appreciate your focus on safety, Christine. So thank you, as always, for speaking with us.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because often I forget, that in other areas, things are different.
Yes.
So really, your bee association, other beekeepers have lots of information about what it's like to catch swarm in your respective areas. And that's where you get the best information. When bees swarm, who to contact, who are the people that, if it's an extraction, who do you call, and all that. So use that. There's an immense amount of knowledge in beekeeping groups.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Excellent advice. Thank you.